Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sex and the Midlife Girl. I'm Lynn Forbes, co-founder of WOW Network, and I have a fantastic set of guests here. I've got our video partner, Andy Lyons, and Andy is the Chief Passion Curator at BringBackDesire.com, and she is also the host of the After Dark radio show. Welcome, Andy. How are you?
I am fabulous today. I'm tuned in and I'm turned on and thrilled to be here and waving to all my favorite goddesses out there. Woohoo!
You look at your boa, and we also, next to Andy, have Dr. Jen Landa. Jen is an OBGYN, and she's certified in preventative and regenerative medicine. She's an expert in bioidentical hormones for both men and women. And Jen is the author of The Sex Drive Solution for Women. Welcome, Jen. I hear I hear you're part doctor, part cheerleader, part coach. So we'll get to that. And then next to Jen is Joan Price, and Joan is a writer. Hi, Joan, and a speaker, and she's an ageless sexuality advocate. She is the author of a number of books, including Better Than I Ever Expected, Straight Talk about Sex After 60. Sorry, I stumbled over that. Which recounts her own sexual reawakening at the age of 57. And then she's also the author of a more recent book called Naked at Our Age. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Joan.
Thanks for having me here.
I am thrilled to have you. This is such an important topic because I think what happens at midlife is that we start to sort of give up or we make things less important than they were in our previous lives. And actually, to me, sex is even more important at this time in life than it perhaps was at any other time of life. And so this is such an important life-affirming topic to discuss for women. So I'm going to ask each of you, just jump in and we're just going to have a conversation. What does it mean to have a good sex life at midlife and beyond?
Oh, Joan, you take that.
Oh, yeah. You're starting with such an easy question, are you?
Good. Oh, good. No, I mean, like, what's good sex at midlife?
What is good sex at midlife? Well, that can be so complicated because many of us are either unpartnered or a marriage has gone stale or the old ways don't work anymore the way they used to. So I'd say good sex is being in touch with your own sensuality and sexuality, what arouses you, what brings you to orgasm, and how to have intimacy in your life. Put all that together, you've got good sex.
That sounds very simple.
I like your answer, Joan. I want to say the thing that immediately popped into my head was just even that you're having some sort of sex, and even not with a partner, but even with yourself, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because I, for instance, had a patient the other day come to my office, 63 years old. She was following up with me. I'd started seeing her several months ago, and she, thought, as most women do who come to me, that her problem was hormones. So she's 63, she has vaginal dryness and pain, which is a common complaint of women, of course, with low estrogen and low hormones. So I put her on hormone replacement. She came back 3 months later. I said, how do you feel? She said, great. Well, okay. One of her initial complaints, though, was that she had no libido. Mm-hmm. So she comes back a few months later. I said, how do you feel? She said, great. She said, I'm sleeping fabulous. I feel great. She said, but the sex drive hasn't budged at all. Uh-huh. I said, okay. Well, how about the vaginal dryness? And she said, this sort of gave her away. She goes, I'm not really sure. And I said, well, what do you mean by you're not really sure? And she said, well, and then we got into more detail. She said, well, they haven't actually had sex in 3 years. And not only have they not had sex in 3 years, she's not masturbating at all. She's not even touching herself down there at all. And the worst part, really, and the part that I think to me was so astounding was that they'd stopped touching altogether. There really was not only a lack of sexual intimacy, but there was a lack of physical intimacy, and a lack of emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
And so that's when I sat down and explained to her, you can't expect your libido to come roaring back when you don't have any of those other pieces of the puzzle going on. And she really misses that physical intimacy, but she said what would happen when she wasn't feeling sexual was that he would approach her and then she wouldn't want to have sex, so he stopped approaching. And so ultimately they've gotten to this point where they sit this was even amazing to me, they sit in the evening watching TV from recliners of their own, and the only time they ever even touch really is if they're out in the mall or on the street, they'll hold hands, or there's an occasional peck on the cheek. And I said, wow, we've got a lot of work to do before we're even worried about sex.
Well,
Oh,
yeah, and I think it's true. It's happened to a lot of Americans. I read recently over 40 million Americans in relationships are not having sex. They're holding hands, maybe, but they've turned into roommates, and the brain shuts down. And all of us here know that aging doesn't diminish desire, it's attitude. What were you going to say, Joan?
Well, what I was going to say is there's so many components to that story, and I'm really glad Dr. Jen brought that up, because when we were hormonally more vibrant, let's say, our sex drive just took care of us, but now we need to take care of it.
I love that. I love that too.
It's up to us to put some work into not only figuring out, well, definitely figuring out what arouses us, what we need, what gives us delight and pleasure, but also how to communicate about that, and how to, this is something that always surprises audiences when I tell them, that for women, don't wait for the libido, don't wait for the mood. Start having sex, and as you get aroused, the mood will follow. It's the other way around from what it used to be when we were young. That's just part of aging.
It's like happiness. You have to cultivate your sexuality, your libido, your sensuality. You can't just, as Joan just said.
Yeah, I think that it's true that at midlife and beyond, you have to be proactive about all parts of your life, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Sex included.
That's right.
Like in addition to what you guys were just saying, I tell patients you have to look at it as a practice, just like you want to eat well and exercise to stay thin and healthy and fit. You have to make sex a practice, and you have to have a sexual practice, and sort of to what Joan was saying, you have to cultivate it. I explain that to women all the time.
I'm getting very excited, not in a sexual way, that this is, we're actually verbalizing this, because I think so many times we have these questions or these issues or challenges in our heads, and that's where they stay, instead of out speaking to our friends or seeking advice from experts and doctors, where it really makes such a huge difference right now. I don't understand. Maybe you guys could address this. Why is it okay for so many women to sort of just say, it's as good as it's going to get for me at this age, or whatever, I don't miss it that much? Why do we do that?
Why do we do it, or why? What should we do instead? Maybe is more a better question. We do it because without the hormonal drive, that impetus, that part of us that used to say, "I'm craving sex now." If we don't have that, we don't realize that it's still really, really important for our physical health, for our sexual health, for intimacy in relationships, for our sense of well-being, for so many different things, that we just drive ourselves. We may not be driven, but we know how to drive. And it's really important for us to do that.
I think I'm absolutely right. And also, women are emotionally aroused, so it's not like we see a Victoria's Secret ad and go, woohoo! We need to get our brain tuned in. And of course, the most important G-spot, in my opinion, is between our ears. It's in our brain. And how do you get that fired up? It can be anything from just starting to appreciate your body and really understand that men do not see the parts of your body that you do. They just want your legs and limbs wrapped around them, tuned in, turned on to be with them, and they're not saying, what's with that dimple there, and why are those breasts sagging? They don't see it. And then that's why also red light bulbs are wonderful for the bedroom. I mean, why not make it look like a dark room? Only kidding. But get the nice music, the nice candles, get yourself sensually, your senses thinking about, how can I get tuned into my body? Start to love your body more. Put on the romantic music. If lingerie, boas, things like that do it for you, find something that makes you feel sexy. And then, of course, at Bring Back Desire, you know what I have. I curate really great erotic romance, which will also get you within 35 pages, remembering why you do like sex, whether it's with yourself or with your partner.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm wondering, I think sex was complicated as a young woman there for other reasons. I mean, is sex as any more complicated now than it was? When I say complicated, I mean, Dr. Jen, you can talk to this. I mean, there are a lot of hormonal issues and nutrition issues and physical issues that start to play here at this time of life. So again, that whole balancing act. But is it any more complicated? It's just different. It's not any more complicated, right?
I agree. I don't think it's any more complicated. I think it's different. And I think, like Joan was saying, the rules are a little bit different. So you just have to learn what the rules are and how to play by them. To pick up on what Andy was saying, I think that's so important about the senses. And I teach this in my Rewire Your Desire course. I have a senses quiz for women to really tune into which of their senses do they find the most erotic. And the way that ties into hormones so importantly is because when we tune into our senses and when we stimulate our senses, we stimulate the hormone oxytocin. Mm-hmm. And oxytocin is our cuddle hormone or our love hormone. They talk about it. But what it also does is it stimulates us, it arouses us. Oxytocin decreases our orgasm threshold, meaning it makes it easier to have an orgasm, and it makes it more likely that we're going to get turned on. So anything that increases our oxytocin, and that could be, we all think about physical touch when we hear oxytocin, so cuddling and massages and things like that. But we can raise our own oxytocin all by ourselves just by appreciating beautiful art or listening to a beautiful song. There's all kinds of wonderful ways to increase your oxytocin. And like Andy said, setting the scene to really turn yourself on is really a part of it. You know, we can't, like Joan was saying, we can't just wait for the libido to happen to us. It's not like we're gonna, I say that to my patients, even when I restore their hormone balance, they don't get to the point where they're sitting there going, yeah, I'm ready now. You know, it doesn't really just come back like that. Nobody really has that except for, 18-year-old women, But what does come back and can be even so much more wonderful is what you can curate, what you can cause to happen every single day through practices like tuning into your senses and, like you were talking about, getting your hormones balanced in other ways, like proper nutrition, proper exercise. All of those things, believe it or not, play a huge role in getting your hormones balanced. Like eating the right things. For instance, getting rid of sugar in your diet will raise your testosterone. Doing interval training will raise your testosterone. And testosterone causes the vaginal tissues to be thicker and more lubricated. So there's things that you can do naturally to get that all back on track. Is that kind of what you were talking about when you said more complicated or needing to learn some new rules maybe?
I'd like to add to that too, that physical exercise just in itself increases blood flow, and increasing the blood flow to the muscles increases it to the genitals and to the brain at the same time. So we're not only doing our heart good, but we're doing our nether regions really, really good too.
Well, the scientific research actually shows that there's a huge connection between those two. You know, they're talking about it a lot in men right now as far as erectile dysfunction being a first sign of heart disease, essentially, because the blood vessels in the heart respond very much the same as the blood vessels in the penis. But what we need to realize is that there's a lot of similarity between the vagina and the penis, so that the blood vessels in our nether region, so to speak, are very much the same and respond to the same treatments as the blood vessels in our heart, like Joan was saying. So certainly eating better. There's been studies that have shown that eating a Mediterranean diet will increase women's sexual responsiveness. And of course exercise will definitely do that. So go out and eat a Mediterranean meal and exercise before a date night.
But I also want to go back to what you said, Lynn, about younger. I mean, except for the millennial generation, which seems to be completely aware of every part and piece and celebrating it all, we were not taught that. We have a lot of shame shrouding this whole area, and also we, as women, add shame to each other when we talk about this part of our body. And I just love encouraging women, find out what tunes you in and turns you on, because what happens a lot of times when people get into a relationship, they're footloose and fancy free and having great sex, and then life starts to happen and they have children, and mothers all of a sudden think, I can't be that way, I'm a mother, and they start shutting down. And so it's so important to go into the bedroom by yourself and find out what turns you on. And then this, of course, is a lovely time when men actually do take directions well. So you can go into the bedroom with your darling and say, this turns me on. I love when you touch here. Or you, if you're comfortable enough to explore that with your partner, then do that, because the ability to have an orgasm becomes so much pressure for a married woman or someone in a long-term relationship that they're so afraid they start faking it. And for men, that's just such an ultimate betrayal. And so it's important to find out what gets you there and how to get there, but it requires research.
Well, let's talk about our partners for a moment, because men are going through their own changes at this life, and I think that your sex life, for the most part, is indicative of your relationship in general. And as you were saying, Andy, things sort of get busy and complicated, or you've been together a long time, whatever the set of circumstances. But men physically and emotionally are going through their own changes. And so how can we be in tune? How can we help, make that connection so that they're feeling comfortable as well?
I've got one idea that's, I think, pretty important, that when we realize that things are different for us, that we need different forms of arousal, that whatever it is our partner's been doing all along isn't really working for us anymore, we need to know some good tricks for how to talk to our partner about that. For example, saying, I hate it when you do this, is not going to ever help. But if instead we say, I really love making love with you, but things are changing in me, and I'd love to explore what might turn me on these days. Would you go on that journey of exploration with me? Who'd turn that down?
Right, great.
No man that I know. I'm always telling women that men want the roadmap. They want the set of instructions in this case. And I think too many of us may suffer from the, well, if he really loved me, he would know.
Oh, the mind reader syndrome.
The mind reader syndrome, exactly. And I think too many women expect that somehow he would just magically know. Or then there are those of us who have the shame that you were talking about and embarrassment in discussing it. But the communication is essential, and I love that you're bringing out the fact that we need to figure out what turns us on and then to share that with our partners. That's so essential. But also to keep in mind what's changing for them, like you were saying.
That's right.
One thing that I've heard from some men is that they've kind of gotten by on a sort of brand of sex that isn't really a great intimate form of sex, but it's sort of the woman giving in to the man. Maybe she doesn't really feel like it, but she allows him to do his thing, so to speak. and what I've heard from some men who especially are starting to suffer from some erectile dysfunction is that doesn't cut it for them anymore. They need more responsiveness and more stimulation to keep them going and keep them aroused, whereas maybe they functioned differently before. So I think we also have to keep in mind the changes in their function.
And two things about that I think women really need to understand is, one, men need more touching too than they used to. They don't have automatic erections anymore. And the other is, if a partner is not getting an erection, it's not because he doesn't find us attractive anymore, because we'll take that on right away, right? We'll say,
yes.
Oh no, he doesn't want me anymore. He thinks I'm ugly, thinks I'm wrinkly, thinks I'm too fat. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, and I think too that in a relationship, someone always has the higher sex drive, the libido drive. So you have to have that important conversation, especially because opposites do attract. And you have to have the conversation that says, okay, if I'm the lower sex drive in the relationship, I need to have you take initiation more often. And so, this time, many times a week or a month, you're responsible for setting up the sex, so I don't always feel like I'm the hunter or the other person feeling burdened.
Now, we've spent a lot of time on couples, but what about the single women at midlife? That's another set of issues and realities, and many women are single at this age.
That's right, and one of the really important things, I think, is for women to get in touch with their own sexual responsiveness, and one way to do that is by exploring sex toys. I'm such a proponent of vibrators.
Me too.
I review them on my blog, nakedadourage.com. I've reviewed about 70 vibrators from a senior perspective.
Wow.
I know.
Oh, it's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. Joan.
Somebody, I know.
Oh my goodness! So when you go to stores that have ergonomic utilities and tools and such, perhaps we should make sure that vibrators are also included in those stores.
That and a very good lubricant. And that is absolutely key.
It's essential. It's essential. And again, women need to understand it's not anything lacking in them that they need a lubricant or they need a vibrator. It's just what is. Accept it, celebrate it, and enjoy it.
That is fabulous, fabulous advice. So can you really have good sex for the rest of your life? I mean, is there a point where you just silly to expect it, or can you have, I mean, can you go down screaming, so to speak?
I hope so.
Absolutely.
We've heard stories in the nursing home, or assisted living.
There was an amazing study that they looked at. It was an extension of the Rancho Bernardo study, which is a pretty well-known study, where they looked at women specifically from the 40s to the 80s, and they found that women in all of those age groups were still having excellent orgasms, excellent sexual responsiveness. But what was really interesting is kind of what we talked about before. They showed that at least, I think it was in the 70s to 80% of the women were still having satisfying sex with good orgasms. But more than 50 of them had felt like they had low desire. So it's interesting what Joan was saying, the fact that you just have to jump in.
Yeah.
And you still can have very satisfying sex, even if the desire isn't the preceding factor. So sometimes the desire comes after the arousal nowadays.
That's right.
The rules have changed. And you know what? I find, though, even in women in their 40s, that those same rules may have changed even in women as young as their 30s and 40s. And we have to start realizing that that can happen at any age, but we can certainly have sex till any age. And I think even more so when we realize that those new rules are at play. But yes, definitely, it's been documented well in the science.
Well, at Bring Back Desire, I have a guest post by Tammy Black, who is a witty woman writing, and she wrote a post called "Are We Ever Too Old to Have Sex?" It is hysterical. She's like Andy Roney. But I also took a lot of heart from the comments that were left, because sometimes it shifts. Sometimes it's the cuddling, and then sometimes it is holding on to the bed poles and screaming. It shifts, etc., depending on your mood. And I think, Dr. Jen, you're absolutely right that a lot of times we can be aroused, but I got something else to do, and we have to cultivate that desire, because in the end, it's not just a physical thing, having a wonderful orgasm. The journey there, the self-knowledge, women, we get grounded in our bodies by touching and being in our bodies. We're stirring up the most creative part energetically of our bodies, because that area, the whole area of the vulva, is where we birth creative ideas. So you really want to keep that tuned in. And also the awakening that you have, almost that spiritual connection at the end of intimacy, whether it's with your beloved self or with your beloved partner, it takes veils away from life that we have put up with our brain activity. And all of a sudden you're seeing things with such a deeper, intimate feeling that you don't always have as you rush around the day using that wonderful brain that we have that is so multitasking all the time.
And we deserve it, right? Don't we deserve to have happiness and pleasure and on many levels? So I think that we have to give ourselves permission, and I think we have to give ourselves a break too. I think that patience and just awareness and being proactive about exploring what works for you at this point may be different than what worked for you 10 years ago or 12 years ago. That's not a failure, right? It's just the reality of what it is to evolve. It's an evolution. I think we need to look at it as an evolution in our lives. So I think that's really powerful. So before we go, I'd love to hear from each of you sort of your sex prescription, using a medical term, what you would advise. And I would also love, now your websites and your books and your radio show, Andy, are outstanding resources. I encourage everyone to please, please, please take advantage and check it out. And if you have any other resources as well, ladies, to help us on this journey. So if you could give me your prescription, Andy, what would you say is in your little sex kit, in your little sex kitten kit?
Well, I'm just going to quote Marty Klein, who wrote Sexual Intelligence, which is relax and have great sex with the body you have, the partner you have, and the situation you have.
Awesome.
Make it a great time. And remember, too, whether you're flying solo or with someone, it's such an important way of deepening the intimacy with yourself. You can always find me, bringbackdesire.com. You can hop on my Facebook page. We always have great conversations going there. After Dark Radio Show is a great podcast you can grab anytime at iTunes, or you can find it right at bringbackdesire.com. I'm always available to answer any questions and steer you to wonderful sexperts like Dr. Jen and like Joan Price. Remarkable, remarkable women who can really help you.
You are a fount and an inspiration. You are truly a curator, Andy. Thank you. Dr. Jen, what do you think? What's your prescription? I know you give prescriptions, write prescriptions every day, literally, but what's your sex prescription?
I do. You know, I look mainly at 5 particular areas, and I think I call my program Rewire Your Desire, and I think women need to rewire their habits, their attitudes, their relationships, their stress, and their hormones. And I help women look at all of those things because, like we talked about, this is a practice, and it's a multifaceted practice. And if we dedicate just even a little time to it every day, to making these things a habit, then it's simple to do. And so I've written about this in my book, The Sex Drive Solution for Women, and I'm so passionate about it that I've created a program for women with webinars and quizzes and all kinds of online help at rewiredesire.com.
Awesome.
And I'd love to help any women who are having trouble in this area, want guidance in this area. I think it's just incredibly important to maintain that level of intimacy, like Andy was saying, with yourself and with your partner. And I really appreciate you guys including me in this lovely session today.
Thank you for your inspiration and for helping women. This is important work, really important work. And Joan, what's your prescription for women? You've been immersed in this for a while yourself, so you've seen it all.
I don't know if I've seen it all, but I'm still looking. Well, my prescription for both men and women, because we're not really just talking to women here, we're talking to men also, is to take charge of your sexuality, figure out what brings you sexual pleasure, and make sure that happens. Don't put it on the back burner. Schedule it. Make it happen for you. Figure out what you need to assist you. And if you are having problems, if sex is not great for you right now, realize that for every problem there is a solution. So go looking for information. I would, of course, direct you first to my award-winning book, Naked at Our Age, Talking Out Loud About Senior Sex, which was named Book of the Year by the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists last year, and Best Self-Help Book by the American Society of Journalists and Authors. So I'm very proud of it, and it has an awful lot of information. My website is joanprice.com. My blog is nakedatourage.com, and I'm very easy to find by email, by Facebook, everywhere.
Thank you. And you all of you are very accessible, and that's important. So thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do it again. And you guys are awesome. You have a lot of wotitude, as we call it here at Woe Network.